Divers opened the hatch. The crew was gone, the clocks still ticking. The cold Atlantic wind howled across the surface of the water, slicing through the pre-dawn darkness like a blade. Waves rose and fell in uneven rhythm, their crests flecked with foam under a sky still clinging to stars. It was early morning, just past 4 o'clock, on the 7th day of March in the year 1987, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Vigilant had been dispatched from Port Canaveral after an automated distress signal flickered to life from the coordinates of the Stella, a private research vessel registered out of Norfolk, Virginia. No voice transmission followed, only the repeating pulse of a Mayday beacon, weak but persistent, like a heartbeat fading beneath ice. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? By the time the boarding team reached the hull of the Stella, the sea had grown restless. Lieutenant Thaddeus Vale, a seasoned maritime investigator with the Coast Guard's Search and Rescue Division, stood at the edge of the deck, gripping the rail as the swell lifted the cutter sideways. His breath came in short clouds, his eyes scanning the silent silhouette ahead. There were no lights aboard, no movement, just the creak of metal and the groan of stressed rivets echoing from within the darkened superstructure. "Something's wrong," muttered Petty Officer Lorne Kestrel, adjusting his helmet cam. He was younger, sharp-eyed, with a nervous energy that flared whenever silence stretched too long. No response to radio hails. No crew on deck. Not even a flare. Thaddeus didn't answer. He stepped forward, boots clanging against the gangplank as it settled onto the research vessel's main deck. The air smelled of salt, yes, but underneath, something sharper. Metallic, like old wiring or scorched insulation. He paused, hand resting on the hatch handle. It was warm, not from the sun hadn't risen yet, but from within. Heat radiated faintly through the steel, unnatural for a ship adrift in 38-degree Fahrenheit waters. He glanced back once. The rest of the team waited behind him, Kestrel, Ensign Marin Voss, and Medic Darren Cope. All wore full gear, thermal suits, respirators, sidearms. Protocol dictated caution when vessels went silent. But this wasn't just silent, this was absent, as if the world had exhaled and the Stella had been forgotten in the breath. With a slow turn, Thaddeus pulled the hatch open. A rush of stale, overheated air poured out thick with the scent of ozone and something vaguely sweet, like burnt sugar. The corridor beyond was dimly lit by emergency strips along the floor, casting long shadows up the walls. Panels hung loose from the ceiling, wires dangling like roots torn from soil. And then, there it was. The sound. Faint, rhythmic, almost musical. Clocks. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Mounted on bulkheads, bolted to consoles, taped to lockers, analog dials spinning, second hands ticking in erratic unison. Some moved forward, others backward. A few stuttered, frozen between seconds. Digital displays blinked in red, dates flashing nonsensically. January 3rd, 2005. July 9th, 1999. November 1st, 1973. None matched the current date, none made sense. But the crew gone, no bodies, no signs of struggle, no blood, no personal effects scattered. Everything was in place. Coffee cups half filled, logbooks open mid-sentence, jackets hanging neatly on hooks. A thermos sat on the galley table, still warm. Beside it, a pair of gloves' fingers curled as if recently removed. And yet, no one. Ensign Voss knelt beside a wall panel, her gloved fingers brushing over a cluster of clocks wired together with copper thread. "These aren't standard issue," she said, voice tight. "They're not even from the same manufacturer. Some look homemade." Darren Cope moved toward the sleeping quarters, door ajar, bunks made, pillows flattened, as though someone had just risen. He checked the head, the mess hall, the engine room, all empty. "It's like they vanished," he whispered. "Just stepped out of their lives." Thaddeus walked deeper into the vessel, drawn toward the central lab. That's where the heat intensified. The door was sealed shut, reinforced with a manual latch on the outside. He hesitated. Then, with a grunt, he turned the wheel and pushed. Inside, the temperature climbed near 110 degrees. Rows of monitors lined the far wall, all dark except one, a single screen glowing with shifting waveforms. pulsing in time with the ticking from the hallway. In the center of the room stood a cylindrical chamber, roughly 6 feet tall, constructed of polished steel and glass. It hummed softly, a low frequency vibrating through the floor. Wires snaked from its base into a junction box labeled Temporal Feedback Array. Do not disconnect. Thaddeus approached slowly. On the console beside the chamber, a logbook lay open. The last entry read, March 6th, 1987, final test initiated at 2200 hours. Field stabilized at 0.87 terahertz. Temporal resonance achieved. Crew reporting mild disorientation. Clock drift noted in adjacent sectors. Proceeding to Phase 3 despite protocol concerns. Dr. Corwin Hale insists integrity holds. If this works, we may witness causality inversion. God help us if we don't return. Below it, scrawled in different ink, shaky and urgent, we weren't supposed to see it. We weren't supposed to remember. The clock doesn't move forward, it chooses. It chose to erase us. Don't open the chamber, don't listen to the ticks. They're not counting time, they're counting down to when you forget too. Thaddeus stared at the page, his throat tightened. Behind him, Kestrel entered, breathing hard. Lieutenant, you need to see this. He led Thaddeus back to the bridge. The navigation system was offline, but the backup chronometer, factory sealed, never tampered with, was spinning wildly. Not just the second hand, the entire mechanism, hour, minute, second revolving in reverse. And then, abruptly, stopping. It read, 4:17 a.m., March 7th, 1987. Exactly the time they had arrived. No, Thaddeus breathed. That's impossible. Kestrel pointed to the radar scope. Empty. No other vessels within 50 nautical miles, no aircraft, nothing. Yet on the communications board, the tape recorder was running. They rewound it, pressed play. Static. Then a voice, calm, familiar. It was Thaddeus's own. This is Lieutenant Thaddeus Vale. We've boarded the Maristella at approximately 4:17 M crew is missing, systems compromised. Recommend immediate quarantine and retrieval. Do not approach the central chamber. Repeat, do not open it. The recording ended. Silence fell like a weight. Marin Voss looked up, face pale. That was just recorded. We haven't reported anything yet. Thaddeus turned toward the lab. The humming had changed, grown louder, more insistent. The single monitor now displayed a new message, scrolling in crisp white text. Initiation sequence repeated. Observers registered. Temporal loop confirmed. And below it, previous attempt failed. This cycle must succeed. Darren backed away, shaking his head. We weren't the first ones here, were we? Thaddeus didn't answer. He remembered the thermos, the gloves, the warmth. Someone had been here moments before, or someone would be, and they'd left clues, warnings, for themselves. Because if time wasn't linear, if the past and future could bleed into the present, then perhaps they weren't rescuers. Perhaps they were echoes. Back in the lab, the chamber began to vibrate. A thin crack appeared in the glass. From within, a shadow shifted. Not human, not quite, but familiar. As if seen in a dream, or remembered from a photograph taken years ago. And then the clock stopped. Every single one. The silence was deafening. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. Then, simultaneously, they restarted. But this time, they all showed the same time. 4:13 a.m., March 7th, 1987. 4 minutes earlier. Thaddeus felt it then, a pressure behind his eyes, a tingling in his fingertips. A memory surged, unbidden. Standing on this very deck, gripping the hatch, hearing Kestrel say, something's wrong, as if for the first time, only he hadn't remembered that before. Or had he? He turned to the others. Their faces were blank, confused, as if waking from sleep. What? What are we doing here? Marin asked, blinking rapidly. We just arrived, Kestrel said, stepping forward. No response to radio hails, no crew on deck, not even a flare. Thaddeus froze. He had heard this before. He had lived this before. And in that moment, he understood. They weren't breaking into the loop. They were trapped inside it. The Maristella wasn't abandoned. It was waiting for them to make the same mistake again. And somewhere, deep in the bowels of the ship, the chamber pulsed once, like a heart remembering how to beat. Months later, the official report listed the Maristella as lost at sea, presumed sunk during a sudden storm front. All hands missing, presumed dead, the case was closed, files archived, survivors, none. Evidence, scant. Just a few corrupted audio logs, a set of mismatched timestamps, and one handwritten note found in Thaddeus Vale's personal effects delivered to his sister's home in Asheville, North Carolina, with no return address, postmarked June 11th, 1987. The note read simply, "I remember the clocks. I remember the heat. I remember saying the same words, seeing the same faces. I don't know how many times I've lived this. But I know one thing, if you're reading this, I failed again. And you're next. Listen carefully. When you hear the ticking, don't follow it. Don't open the hatch. And whatever you do, don't trust the time on your watch." The letter was dated March 7th, 1987. But the postmark was from March 7th, 2024. And in a small attic drawer in Asheville, buried beneath old photographs and yellowed letters, a single analog clock sits untouched. Its hands have not moved in 37 years. Yet every night, at exactly 4:17 a.m., it ticks once, as if reminding someone, as if calling them back. Ohio's Vanishing Room legend turned out to be a crime scene. In the quiet, rolling hills of southeastern Ohio, where the trees grow thick and the fog clings to the valley long after sunrise, there stands an old farmhouse just off State Route 327, near the unincorporated community of Gloucester. The structure, weathered by decades of wind and rain, has stood vacant since the late 1980s, its windows shattered, its roof sagging under the weight of time. Locals have long avoided it, not out of mere disrepair, but because of a story whispered in hushed tones at county fairs and over coffee at roadside diners. They call it the Vanishing Room, a place said to swallow people whole, never to be seen again. For years, it was dismissed as folklore, a ghost tale spun to scare children from wandering too far into the woods. But in the autumn of 2017, when a young man named Thaddeus Mallory disappeared without a trace, the legend took a chilling turn, because what investigators found behind those crumbling walls wasn't a myth, it was a crime scene. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? It was on a crisp morning in early October, the kind where the air smells faintly of damp leaves and wood smoke curls from distant chimneys, that Sheriff Elias Crane received the call. A missing person report had been filed by the elderly aunt of Thaddeus Mallory, a 23-year-old aspiring photographer from Athens, Ohio. Thaddeus had told her he was going to explore some abandoned properties for a photo series titled Forgotten Corners. His last known message, sent via text at 6:47 in the evening on October 3rd, read, "Found something strange at the Gloucester house. The back room doesn't match the floor plan. Walls feel wrong." Then, silence. Sheriff Crane, a man with 31 years on the force and a face lined by both sun and sorrow, knew the Gloucester house by reputation only. He'd heard the stories of hikers who claimed they entered the house and exited miles away, of teenagers who swore they saw a door where none should be, opening into a space that defied logic. But he was a practical man, grounded in evidence, not superstition. Still, when no sign of Thaddeus turned up after 2 days, not at his apartment, not at his favorite diner, not even on surveillance footage from the gas station on Route 59, he ordered a search of the property. The team arrived just after dawn on October 6th, their breath visible in the pale light. The house loomed ahead, surrounded by knee-high weeds and rusted farm equipment half swallowed by the earth. Deputy Marlowe, a rookie with nerves tighter than a snare drum, led the way, flashlight trembling slightly in his grip. The front door groaned open with a sound like a dying animal, releasing a wave of cold, stale air that carried the scent of mildew and something sharper, something metallic. Inside, the house was eerily intact. Dust coated every surface, but there were no signs of forced entry, no broken furniture, no struggle. It was as if time had simply stopped. Photographs still hung crooked on the walls, a calendar from 1986 frozen on the month of July. Sheriff Crane moved through the kitchen, then the parlor, calling out Thaddeus's name, his voice echoing through the hollow rooms. Nothing answered. Then they reached the hallway. It was here that things began to feel off. The corridor seemed longer than it should have been, stretching farther than the exterior walls allowed. The floorboards creaked unevenly, and the wallpaper, once floral, now peeling in long strips, pulsed faintly in the draft, as though breathing. Deputy Marlowe paused, turning to the sheriff. "Sir, did we pass that door before?" he asked, pointing to a narrow paneled entrance on the left. Crane frowned. He didn't remember it. They opened it. Beyond lay a small room no more than 10 feet by 12, but everything about it felt unnatural. The ceiling sloped downward at an impossible angle, though the house outside had a flat roof. The walls were covered in crude symbols, drawn in what later tests would confirm as human blood, layered over decades. And in the center of the floor, a circle had been etched into the wood, filled with ash and bone fragments. Most disturbing of all, the room had no window, yet a faint greenish light seemed to emanate from the corners, flickering like old television static. Sheriff Crane's radio crackled. "We've got movement on thermal," came the voice of Officer Lyle, stationed outside. "Two figures, inside the house. One near the back hall. The other, sir. The second heat signature is coming from inside the west wall." Crane turned slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the dust. There was no west wall in this room, it faced north. His pulse quickened. He stepped toward the northern wall, pressing his palm against the plaster. It gave slightly, like soft clay. He pushed harder, and his hand sank through. He yanked it back with a gasp. The hole sealed itself instantly, leaving no mark. "This isn't possible," Marlowe whispered, backing away. "This isn't real." But it was real. And worse, it was occupied. Later analysis would reveal traces of DMT and other hallucinogenic compounds in the air, suggesting someone had been burning psychoactive substances to induce altered states. But forensic teams also uncovered human remains buried beneath the floorboards, 3 sets of bones, carbon dated to the 1970s, 80s, and early 2000s. Dental records confirmed one belonged to a woman named Elspeth Vorn, reported missing in 1979 after telling friends she was investigating a doorway to another place in rural Ohio. And then there was Thaddeus. On October 9th, during a second sweep of the property, K-9 Unit Officer Renata Cho discovered a trapdoor hidden beneath a collapsed section of the basement. Behind it, a narrow tunnel descended into darkness. The walls were lined with photographs, dozens of them taken inside the vanishing room. Faces stared out from the images, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with terror. Among them was Thaddeus, captured mid-stride, unaware, seconds before vanishing from the known world. At the end of the tunnel, they found him. Not alive. Not exactly. His body was seated upright, propped against the stone wall, dressed in the same clothes he'd worn the night he disappeared. His skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over his bones. His eyes were open, pupils dilated, fixed on a point beyond the ceiling. In his lap lay a leather-bound journal filled with frantic handwriting, sketches of shifting corridors, spiraling staircases leading nowhere, and repeated phrases, "It watches, it learns. It remembers names." The final entry, dated October 4th, just 1 day after his last text read, "I think I'm still here. I think I never left, but something else is wearing my face now. If you find this, don't go back, don't look for the door, it knows you're looking, it's always listening." The case was officially closed in March of 2018. Authorities cited homicide, though no suspect was ever identified. The house was condemned and scheduled for demolition, but crews refused to touch it. Dynamite placed at the foundation failed to detonate. Bulldozers stalled mid-approach, engines dead despite full tanks. Eventually, the state erected a chain-link fence around the property, topped with barbed wire, and posted warning signs, "No trespassing, hazardous structure." Yet, even now, nearly 7 years later, locals report seeing lights in the windows on foggy nights. Hunters claim to hear whispers drifting through the trees, voices calling names of people who've never been to Gloucester. And sometimes, on the edge of sleep, residents swear they feel a pressure behind their eyes, a sensation of being pulled not forward, but sideways, into a space that shouldn't exist. The vanishing room, it seems, is not done, and perhaps it never will be. Because legends don't die in places like Ohio. They wait, they breathe, they grow hungry. And they remember. Thaddeus Mallory was not the first. He certainly won't be the last. So the next time you drive down a lonely road, past a house that looks just a little too still, a little too quiet, ask yourself, does the layout make sense? Do the doors line up? And when you pass by, do you feel, just for a second, as though the air has thickened and something on the other side of the wall has noticed you? Be careful. Some rooms don't let go. Some doors only open one way. And some houses, like the one near Gloucester, standing sentinel in the mist, don't just hold secrets, they feed on them. The investigation remained open for months, though leads dried up faster than puddles in summer heat. Psychologists analyzed Thaddeus's journal, concluding he likely suffered a psychotic break induced by toxins or isolation. Skeptics pointed to mold, carbon monoxide, or underground gas leaks as explanations for the hallucinations, but none could explain the photos. None could explain how his body appeared untouched by decay, preserved in a state that defied medical understanding. And no scientist could replicate the phenomenon of the shifting walls, the impossible geometry, the way the room seemed to exist outside normal dimensions. Dr. Corvin Hexton, a parapsychologist from Case Western Reserve University, visited the site in May of 2018. He brought with him electromagnetic field detectors, infrared cameras, and a team of graduate students. They spent 3 days collecting data. On the evening of the third day, Hexton entered the vanishing room alone, determined to meditate and record any anomalies. He never came out. Search parties combed the area for weeks. His equipment was found scattered near the basement entrance, cameras smashed, notebooks burned, audio recorders filled with static, and, at one point, a whisper in Hexton's voice, "It showed me the others." They're still walking. They don't know they're dead. After that, the state declared the property off-limits indefinitely, the fence was reinforced, motion sensors installed, helicopter flyovers increased. But still, the stories persist. In 2022, a drone operated by a storm chaser caught footage of the house during a thunderstorm. In one frame, clear, undeniable, the back door opens. A figure steps out. Tall, thin, wearing a coat that flaps in a wind no one else feels. The face is blurred, distorted, as if reality itself refuses to focus on it, and in its hand, it holds a camera. Thaddeus's camera. The video went viral, then vanished from the internet within hours, pulled by unknown authorities. The storm chaser claimed he received a visit from men in dark suits who said nothing, only handed him a sealed envelope and left. Inside was a single photograph, his own face, taken from inside his bedroom sometime during the night. No one believes him, but those who've studied the vanishing room know the truth. It doesn't just take people, it replaces them, and the ones who come back aren't really back at all. They're echoes. Echoes with instructions. Now consider this. When you walk through your home, do you count the doors? Do you notice if the hallway feels longer today than it did yesterday? Have you ever stood in a room and thought, just for a moment, that the walls leaned in slightly, as if listening? Because somewhere, deep in the heart of Ohio, a room waits. A room with no right to exist. A room that remembers every footstep, every breath, every name spoken within its walls. And if you listen closely, on the very edge of silence, you might hear it. Not a creak, not the wind, but a whisper, calling yours. The preacher's doomsday calendar was wrong except for one date. In the quiet town of Harlan, nestled deep within the Appalachian foothills of eastern Kentucky, a man named Thaddeus Vale once stood atop a rusted grain silo on the edge of an abandoned farm, his arms outstretched beneath a bruised twilight sky. It was the autumn of 1998, and the air carried the scent of damp earth and burning leaves, crisp with the promise of change, or so he claimed. Clad in a long charcoal-colored coat that fluttered like crow's wings in the wind, Thaddeus held aloft a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with intricate diagrams, celestial alignments, and what he called the true calendar of divine reckoning. He wasn't a pastor in any official denomination, nor did he preach from a pulpit, but people came all the same, drawn by whispers, by fear, by a hunger for certainty in uncertain times. He spoke not in sermons, but in riddles wrapped in prophecy, warning that the world would end in stages, each date marked by fire, flood, or silence. The first, he said, would come on the 3rd day of April, 2001, a great falling from the sky, a judgment upon the proud towers of men. Then, on the 9th day of July, 2003, rivers would run black and the stars would blink out for 7 hours. By the winter solstice of 2005, he declared, every mirror in the world would crack at exactly 3:17 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. His followers, numbering nearly 400 at their peak, sold homes, quit jobs, and gathered in communal shelters built from scrap wood and salvaged metal, waiting. But none of it happened. April passed without incident. July brought only heat and thunderstorms. On that winter morning in 2005, people woke to find their mirrors intact, their coffee still warm, the world stubbornly ordinary. Disillusionment spread like frost across a window pane. Families left, supplies dwindled, the shelters fell into disrepair, overtaken by kudzu and foxes. Thaddeus himself vanished shortly after, last seen boarding a Greyhound bus bound for Memphis, his journal tucked beneath his arm, his eyes hollow with something between regret and defiance. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now, fast forward to the spring of 2023. A young archivist named Elowyn Price, originally from Asheville, North Carolina, though raised mostly in rural Ohio, was sorting through a donation box at the Ossuary Archive in Lexington, a little-known repository for forgotten religious texts and apocalyptic ephemera. Among crumbling pamphlets and hand-drawn star charts, she found it. Thaddeus Vale's journal, its spine cracked, its pages brittle as dried petals. At first, she paid it little mind, just another relic of millennial panic, another voice lost to time. But then, late one rainy Tuesday night, she flipped to the final page. There, in faded ink, was a single line written in a trembling hand. And when all else has failed, look to the 7th hour of the 13th day of October, 2023. That one I saw clearly. Elowyn paused. She checked the date on her phone. October 13th, 2023, exactly 1 week away. She told no one at first. Not her supervisor, Dr. Calix Renner, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses who believed fervently in cataloging, not interpreting. Not even her roommate, a folk musician named Jory, who played a battered upright bass and claimed to speak in dreams with dead jazz trumpeters. But she couldn't let it go. There was something about the phrasing, the specificity, the weight of it. It didn't sound like the rambling of a madman. It sounded like a confession. So she began to dig. Thaddeus had based his calendar on a blend of numerology, obscure biblical exegesis, and astronomical cycles, particularly the precession of the equinoxes and the rare alignment of Jupiter and Saturn known as the Great Conjunction. Most of his calculations were flawed, built on misreadings of ancient texts and self-invented ciphers. But this final date, October 13th, 2023, coincided with nothing major in the astronomical record. No eclipse, no meteor shower, no planetary alignment of significance. And yet Elowyn noticed something strange. On that exact day, at precisely 7 o'clock in the evening Eastern Daylight Time, the moon would be at perigee, the closest point to Earth in its orbit, and positioned directly over the central United States. At that moment, the sun would have just set in Harlan, Kentucky. Coincidence? Perhaps. But then she found a second clue. Buried in an old police report from November of 2005, a year after Thaddeus disappeared, a deputy in Harlan County mentioned investigating a small fire at the remains of one of the doomsday shelters. Inside, scorched but legible, was a chalkboard with the same date, October 13th, 2023. Beneath it, someone had written, "It isn't destruction, it's remembrance." Elowyn's breath caught. She booked a train to Harlan. The journey took nearly 10 hours, winding through the Blue Ridge Mountains, past coal towns with sagging porches, and churches painted white with peeling trim. When she arrived, the air was thick with the smell of pine and distant rain. Autumn had already begun to paint the hills in amber and rust. She checked into a modest inn called the Hollow Pines Motel, room number 6, where the heater rattled and the curtains smelled faintly of mildew. That evening, she drove out to the old shelter site, guided by GPS and a hand-drawn map she'd copied from the journal. The structure was gone, only a concrete slab remained, half swallowed by ivy and wild blackberry vines. But As she stepped onto it, something shifted in the air. A stillness. A hush, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. She pulled out her phone, opened the voice recorder, and whispered, "It's October 12th. Tomorrow at 7 p.m., I'll be back." She returned at 6:45 the next evening. The sky was overcast, pale gray, streaked with violet at the edges. A cool wind moved through the trees, making the leaves shiver like hands in prayer. She sat on the edge of the slab, her jacket pulled tight, watching the minutes tick by on her watch. 6:52. 6:55. 6:58. At 6:59, the wind stopped. Not gradually, not fading. It ceased as if cut by a blade. Silence pressed down, thick and unnatural. No birds, no crickets. Even the distant hum of a highway seemed to vanish. Her pulse quickened. She glanced around, half expecting shadows to move on their own. Then, at exactly 7 p.m., a single tone echoed through the valley, low, resonant, like a bell struck deep underground. It lasted only 3 seconds, then faded, and just as quickly, the wind returned, rustling the branches, breaking the stillness. Elowen stood frozen, her skin prickled. She reached into her bag and pulled out a portable spectrum analyzer she'd borrowed from a physics professor friend, something meant to detect electromagnetic anomalies. To her astonishment, it had recorded a brief spike in low-frequency waves at exactly 7 o'clock frequency, matching no known natural source, and lasting precisely 2.8 seconds. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Was it man-made, a military test, a geological event, or was it impossibly something else? She spent the next 6 months chasing answers. She interviewed elderly locals who remembered Thaddeus Vale, some with reverence, others with scorn. One woman, Mavis Cray, who had been 16 when the shelters were built, recalled seeing Thaddeus standing alone at midnight on New Year's Eve, 2000, staring at the stars and weeping. He kept saying, "I got most of it wrong, but one day I saw it clear." Another man, a retired geologist named Silas Tovey, confirmed that the region sat atop a network of ancient quartz veins, minerals known to amplify electromagnetic signals under certain conditions. Could Thaddeus have known? Had he discovered something by accident, by vision, by madness that science had yet to explain? Elowen published her findings in a small academic journal, careful not to claim proof, only possibility. She titled it Anomalous Temporal Events and the Psychology of Prophetic Failure. It garnered little attention except from one person. A letter arrived at the archive 6 weeks later, postmarked from Boise, Idaho. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typewritten, "You were there. I saw you on the slab. You heard it too. I've waited 20 years. He told me it would happen only once. Only for those who believed enough to doubt. Tell me, did you feel it?" Not sound, not vibration, but memory. As if the world remembered something it had forgotten. No signature. Just that. Elowen never replied. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the streetlights flicker outside her window in Columbus, where she now lives, she opens the journal again. She runs her fingers over that final line. That one, I saw clearly. And she wonders, was it a hoax? A delusion? Or did Thaddeus Vale, in all his flawed brilliance, truly glimpse one moment not of destruction, but of resonance? A single date when time bent just enough for something to slip through? Not the end of the world, but a whisper from it. Think about that. What if the apocalypse isn't fire and ruin? What if it's a moment so quiet, so precise, that only the ones who are truly listening will ever know it happened? And what if it already did? October 13th, 2023, 7 o'clock in the evening, Eastern Daylight Time. In a field in Kentucky, beneath a motionless sky, a tone rang out, brief, unexplained, undeniable. And somewhere, perhaps, Thaddeus Vale smiled. Because even prophets get things wrong. But sometimes, just once, they're right. And when they are, the world doesn't end. It simply pauses and listens. This desert town exists to hide something. The night siren proves it. The sun had long since collapsed behind the jagged teeth of the Sierra Lamitas, painting the sky in bruised purples and fading oranges, when Elias Thorne first stepped onto the cracked asphalt of Drywater Junction. The air hung thick with dust and silence so deep it pressed against the eardrums like cotton soaked in oil. No crickets, no wind, not even the distant hum of a generator broke the stillness. Just the soft crunch of Elias's boots on gravel and the slow creak of a rusted sign above him that read, "Welcome to Drywater Population 17." That number, he would later learn, was not quite accurate and never had been. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? It was late September in the year 1997 when Elias arrived, a geologist contracted by the Bureau of Land Management to assess subsurface erosion patterns near the Mojave Fringe. He wasn't supposed to stay longer than 3 days. But Drywater had other plans. The town clung to the edge of the desert like a scab, refusing to heal wooden shacks leaning at odd angles, their windows boarded or shattered, paint peeled into ghostly curls. A single gas station stood open, its fluorescent light flickering like a dying heartbeat. Behind the counter sat a man named Orrin Vexley, gaunt as a scarecrow, eyes milky with cataracts that didn't quite hide the sharpness beneath. He handed Elias a room key without asking for ID, without smiling, and said only, "Don't go out after sundown, especially if you hear the siren." "I think the same." Elias laughed, then nervously, more out of discomfort than disbelief. "Siren? Like an air raid?" Orrin didn't blink, like nothing you've heard, and once you do, it stays with you, in your bones. That night, Elias lay on a lumpy cot in room 4 of the Dustvale Motel, the ceiling fan turning with a lazy metallic groan. Outside, the moon hung low and yellow, casting long shadows that seemed too tall, too thin, to belong to any natural object. He'd just closed his eyes when it came a sound so unnatural it froze the breath in his lungs. It began faintly, like whine through a canyon, but quickly swelled into a high-pitched wail, melodic yet dissonant, rising and falling in intervals that defied human tuning. It wasn't electronic. It wasn't animal. It carried weight, like something ancient being dragged across stone. The siren pulsed through the walls, vibrating the glass in the window, making the metal bedframe hum. And beneath it, almost imperceptible, were voices whispering, overlapping, speaking in no language Elias recognized, yet somehow understood in flashes. "They watch from below," one seemed to say. The hollow ones, remember. He bolted upright, heart hammering, sweat slick on his neck. He reached for the lamp, knocking over a glass of water. The siren stopped instantly. Silence crashed back like a slammed door. No birds, no footsteps, nothing. He waited nearly an hour before daring to peer outside. The street was empty. But in the dirt, beside the motel's foundation, something caught his eye: footprints. Small, barefoot, too narrow to be human. They led from the edge of the lot toward the dry riverbed, vanishing where the sand turned black and glassy, as if scorched by fire. The next morning, Elias tried to ask about the siren at the diner, the Rust Spoon, a dim place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. A woman named Merelda Cray sat nursing a cup, her hair pulled back so tightly it made her cheekbones look like knife edges. She looked up when Elias mentioned the sound. "You heard it," she said flatly, not a question. "I did. What is it? Some kind of test? Military?" Merelda set her spoon down with a click. "The siren calls them, brings them closer. We used to have a curfew during the war, World War II, 1943, when the army came through. Built something underground, said it was radar, but the siren started then. First time, then stopped for years, came back in 1978, again in 1989. And now it sings every few nights." Elias frowned. "Who built it?" She leaned forward, voice dropping. "Not who, what? They weren't soldiers, not all of them. Some wore uniforms, yes, but others moved wrong. Too smooth, too quiet. One of them, he had no shadow." Elias wanted to dismiss her as paranoid, superstitious, but the footprints, the silence, the way the townspeople avoided certain streets after dark. And Orrin, when questioned, simply muttered, "We keep the lights off, we don't answer doors, and we never ever whistle at night." Curiosity became obsession. Over the next week, Elias combed through the county archives in nearby Blythe, though most records from the mid-20th century were missing or burned. What he found instead were fragments, a classified project codenamed Operation Hollow Veil, referenced in a declassified memo from the Department of Defense dated March of 1944. Mentioned briefly, acoustic resonance experiments conducted in isolated zones intended to disrupt enemy signal propagation, but the location was redacted. Only a grid coordinate remained, plotted directly beneath Drywater Junction. He returned with a ground-penetrating radar unit borrowed under false pretenses. Working under cover of darkness, he scanned the area near the old rail spur, half a mile east of town. At a depth of 230 feet, the machine picked up a vast hollow chamber circular, approximately 300 yards in diameter. And inside, intermittent pulses of energy, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Then, on the seventh night, the siren returned, louder than before. This time, Elias was ready. He recorded it on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, the kind used for field seismology. As the sound poured from the speakers in his motel room, slowed to half speed, the whispers emerged clearer. Not words, more like impressions, layered beneath the tone. "We sleep beneath the salt," one seemed to convey. "The door must not open. The watcher is blind, but listens." And then, just before the tape ended, a child's voice, soft, trembling, said, "Daddy, why won't the stars come back?" Elias sat frozen, because that voice, he knew it. His own daughter, Lyra, had spoken those exact words the night before she died in a car accident 2 years prior, words never recorded, never shared with anyone. How could a desert town in California know that? He confronted Oren the next day, waving the tape. "What is this place? What are you hiding?" Oren stared at the device, then slowly reached under the counter. He placed a small object on the glass, a rusted metal disc, etched with symbols that looked neither human nor machine-made. Angular. Flowing. Alive. "This was found in the shaft," Oren said. 1951. By a miner named Heston Pike. He went mad within a week. Spent his last days scratching equations on his cell walls. Said the siren wasn't a warning, it was a lullaby, meant to keep something asleep. Elias's hands trembled. Asleep? Oren nodded. Underground. Beneath the old test site. The government thought they were building a bunker, but they weren't digging down, they were uncovering something that was already there. Long before us. Long before anything. And the siren? Elias whispered. It sings to it, calms it. When the power fails, or when someone like you pokes too hard, the song fades, and it stirs. That night, the electricity cut out across Drywater. No explanation, no surge, just darkness. Elias stood at his window, watching. Every house was dark, except one. A small cottage at the edge of town, its porch light blinking in a pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Morse code? SOS. But no one went to help. Instead, doors locked, windows shuttered, and from somewhere far below, a deep subsonic rumble began, felt more than heard, like the earth itself grinding its teeth. Then, faint at first, the siren rose again, this time not from the town, but from beneath it. And this time, it wasn't singing to keep something asleep. It was screaming because it had woken up. Elias grabbed his gear and ran for his truck. But as he turned the key, the engine wouldn't catch. Again. Again. Nothing. He looked up and froze. Standing in the middle of the road, silhouetted by the pale moon, was a figure. Tall. Thin. Limbs too long, moving with a jerking grace, like a puppet tested by invisible strings. Its head tilted slowly, unnaturally, until it faced him. No face, just smooth skin, stretched tight. And from its chest, where a heart should be the siren's melody, pulsed outward, vibrating the air, distorting the light. Elias stumbled back, falling against the truck. He fumbled for the tape recorder, pressed play. His daughter's voice echoed into the night. "Daddy, why won't the stars come back?" The figure paused. Then, in a voice that was not a voice, more like dozens of whispers threaded through metal, it replied, "Because we ate them." Elias didn't scream. He couldn't. His throat sealed shut, his lungs locked. The thing stepped forward, each movement accompanied by a soft chime, like glass bells underwater. But then, faint at first, a new sound joined the chorus. From the gas station, Oren had climbed onto the roof. In his hands, a battered horn, an old railroad signal, rusted and dented. He blew into it with all his strength. A deep, mournful note rolled across the desert. The figure stopped, turned. Another blast, and another. From other houses, lights flickered on, not electric oil lamps, candles. People emerged, carrying instruments, tin whistles, hand drums, a warped violin. They formed a circle around the edge of town and began to play not music, but a complex sequence of tones, rising and falling in precise patterns. The siren from beneath the earth faltered. The figure twitched, then slowly, painfully sank to its knees. Its form blurred like heat over asphalt and then collapsed into a pile of fine gray ash. Silence returned, but not peace. Oren approached Elias, breathing heavily, the horn dangling from his fingers. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "Now it knows your voice, knows your grief. It'll call to you again. In dreams, in static, in the silence between radio stations." Elias swallowed. "What was that thing?" "A scout," Oren said. "A listener, sent ahead. If the song stops for too long, they send more, and if the song dies completely, he didn't finish." "What happens?" Oren looked toward the horizon, where the first hint of dawn stained the sky blood red. "The sky goes dark, not at night, forever, and the ones below climb up." Elias left Drywater the next morning. Officially, he filed a report citing geological instability and abandoned infrastructure. Unofficially, he destroyed the tapes, except one. The one with his daughter's voice. He kept that buried in a safe behind a false wall in his Denver apartment. But sometimes, on still nights when the power blinks, he hears it, a faint, melodic wail, coming not from outside, but from within the walls. And when he presses his ear to the plaster, he doesn't hear the siren. He hears knocking. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. Then a whisper. "Let us sing you to sleep." To this day, no satellite imagery shows Drywater Junction clearly. Clouds always seem to gather above it, even in drought. GPS signals fail within a 5-mile radius. And travelers who claim to have passed through often cannot recall the name of the town, only the silence, only the feeling of being watched from below. And if you drive through the Mojave after midnight and your radio begins to crackle with a strange, haunting tone, do not stop, do not listen, do not answer if something calls your name in a voice you once loved. Because some towns exist not to welcome, but to warn. And Drywater is still singing. The robber who never touched the floor and never got caught. In the winter of 1987, when snow fell like whispers over the city of Pittsburgh and street lamps flickered beneath a sky heavy with clouds, a man named Thaddeus Vale moved through the shadows with a silence so complete it defied belief. He wasn't tall, nor was he broad, just 5'9", wiry with fingers long enough to dance across piano keys or slip between window frames without a sound. His eyes, a pale gray like thawing ice, missed nothing. And though he stole from banks, jewelry stores, and even the homes of the wealthy in Shadyside and Fox Chapel, no one ever saw him run, no one ever heard his footsteps, and not a single footprint was ever found leading away from the scene. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? It started on a night thick with fog, the kind that clung to coat collars and muffled the distant wail of trains along the Monongahela River. The date was December 18th, just 3 days before Christmas. The First National Trust on 5th Avenue had closed at 5, its vault sealed, alarms armed, security guards patrolling in pairs. Yet, by 10 past 2 in the morning, someone had bypassed every system without tripping a wire, without leaving fingerprints, without setting off motion detectors calibrated to sense the flutter of a moth's wing. What they found the next morning chilled the blood of the manager, a man named Harlan Wexford, who arrived at 6:30 sharp with coffee steaming in a paper cup. The front door was locked. The glass unbroken, the alarm panel glowed green, fully operational. But inside, the vault stood open, its steel door yawning wide like a slack jaw. $200,000 in cash, mostly 20s and 50s, bundled in rubber bands, was gone. Also missing, a collection of rare gold coins, appraised at over $400,000, belonging to a reclusive collector from Sewickley. And yet, there were no signs of forced entry, no scuff marks on the floor, no grease on the keypad, nothing. Only one thing puzzled the investigators more than the theft itself: the surveillance footage. On the tape, recorded from a camera mounted high in the corner of the lobby, there was no intruder, just darkness. Static. Then, at exactly 2:12 a.m., a flicker, a distortion, like heat rising from asphalt. For 3 seconds, the image warped. When it cleared, the vault door was slightly ajar. But no figure appeared, no hand reached in, no shadow passed. It was as if the money had simply decided to leave on its own. By midweek, newspapers across Pennsylvania carried the headline, "Phantom Thief Strikes Pittsburgh." Radio stations played eerie synth music behind breathless reports. Police Chief Lyle Mancini held a press conference, his voice tight with frustration, insisting that no man can walk through walls and vowing that the perpetrator would be caught. But deep down, even he felt a chill he couldn't explain. Because this wasn't the first time. 3 months earlier, in September of 1987, the Regal Jewelers on Walnut Street had been hit under nearly identical circumstances. Surveillance showed nothing. Alarms never sounded. The safe opened as if by magic. A string of black pearls, once worn by a silent film star, vanished without a trace. And again, no footprints. No fingerprints. No scent for canine units to follow. Then, in November, it happened at the Carnegie Savings and Loan in Mount Lebanon. This time, a motion sensor near the back office did register something, but only for half a second. The reading? A weightless disturbance, like air shifting in a vacuum. Investigators dismissed it as equipment malfunction, but Thaddeus Vail knew better. He wasn't a criminal by birth, nor was he driven by greed. Born in a coal mining town in West Virginia Welch, population 3,000, he'd grown up in a house with no running water and a roof that leaked when it rained. His father died in a mine collapse when Thaddeus was 9. His mother worked double shifts at a diner, her hands cracked from dishwater and cold. By the time he was 16, he'd taught himself to pick locks, not because he wanted to steal, but because he needed medicine for his younger sister, Lyra, who suffered from seizures doctors said were nervous in origin and expensive to treat. His first break-in was clumsy, a pharmacy at midnight, gloves too big, heart pounding like a war drum. He took only what he needed: phenobarbital, syringes, a bottle of cod liver oil, left a note behind, written in careful script, "I will repay you." TV. No one ever came looking. Over the years, he grew quieter, faster, more precise. He studied architecture, mechanics, airflow patterns, and human behavior. He learned how to move without displacing air, how to step where pressure sensors weren't calibrated, how to exploit blind spots in infrared fields. But his greatest skill, his secret, was not technology. It was timing. Thaddeus didn't walk during heists. He floated. Not literally, of course, but close enough to fool machines, cameras, and instincts alike. Through a combination of controlled breathing, muscle relaxation, and an almost meditative state of balance, he could reduce his physical impact to near zero. He wore custom shoes lined with aerogel foam, lighter than air, insulating, silent. His clothing, tailored from a blend of synthetic fibers used in aerospace gear, absorbed light and muffled sound. He moved in rhythm with the building's natural vibrations, the hum of HVAC systems, the creak of settling beams, so that his presence became part of the background noise. And he never touched the floor. Not directly. Instead, he used a technique he called shadow stepping, placing each foot on the very edge of tiles, where grout met wall, or balancing on the lip of a baseboard, distributing his weight across multiple micropoints. In some cases, he'd enter through ventilation shafts, descending slowly on ropes made of braided Kevlar thread, thin as spider silk, strong as steel. He'd hang suspended above carpets, vaults, marble floors reaching down, with tools shaped like fishing rods to retrieve items without ever grounding himself. To the world, it seemed impossible. To him, it was survival. By early January of 1988, the FBI had assigned Agent Rhoda Keene to the case. A veteran of white-collar crime divisions, she'd transferred from Quantico after solving a series of art thefts in New Orleans using behavioral profiling. She was sharp, skeptical, and immune to sensationalism, but even she paused the first time she watched the grainy bank footage from Fifth Avenue. "There's no one there," she muttered, rewinding the tape for the 7th time. Her partner, Dale Haskins, leaned forward. "Maybe it's a glitch." No, she said, voice low. Look at the dust motes. See how they shift right before the vault opens? Something passed through. Something quiet. They began cross-referencing all previous unsolved thefts in the region. 8 in total, dating back to 1984. All shared the same pattern: no entry, no exit, no evidence. And in 6 of them, weather reports mentioned unusually dense fog on the night of the crime. Coincidence? Possibly. But then, on January 15th, 1988, the unthinkable happened again. This time, it was the home of Arthur Pembroke, a retired steel magnate living in a gated estate in Sewickley Heights. The mansion had 20 rooms, a private gallery, and a security system designed by a former CIA contractor. Motion sensors, laser grids, thermal imaging, everything. At 1:43 in the morning, the system registered a temperature fluctuation in the east wing. Not enough to trigger an alert, just a brief dip like a breath against glass. When Pembroke's housekeeper arrived at 7, she found the display case in the study shattered, not broken outward, but inward, as if crushed from within. Missing, a platinum pocket watch engraved with the coordinates of the Titanic's final resting place, and a letter signed by Thomas Edison promising collaboration on a wireless illumination device. Again, no prints, no alarms, no sign of struggle, but this time there was something new. On the marble floor, just beneath the shattered glass, lay a single playing card. The Queen of Spades, flipped face up. Agent Keene stared at it in the evidence photo, her pulse quickening. He's communicating, she whispered. Haskins frowned. With whom? With us, she said. Or maybe with someone else. She ordered a full forensic sweep of all prior crime scenes, anything left behind, no matter how insignificant. And 2 days later, in a dusty envelope from the Regal Jewelers case, they found it a matchbook from a diner in Clarksburg, West Virginia. On the back, scribbled in pencil, for Lyra. Soon. Keene traced the diner's records. Only one person had asked for directions to Welch that week, a man matching Thaddeus Vale's description, paying an exact change, wearing a long coat and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She flew to West Virginia the next morning. Welch was a ghost of its former self, storefronts boarded up, miners out of work, children playing in empty lots where company houses once stood. She found the Vale residence, easily a sagging frame house on Sycamore Street, paint peeling, porch steps rotted, no lights on, no car in the driveway, but smoke curled from the chimney. She knocked. Silence. Then, the soft click of a lock. The door opened just enough to reveal a woman, thin, pale, wrapped in a wool blanket. Her eyes were red, her hair tied back with a frayed ribbon. Yes? She asked, voice hoarse. Mrs. Vale, Keene said gently. I'm Special Agent Rhoda Keene, FBI. I'm looking for your son, Thaddeus. The woman didn't flinch, didn't gasp, just exhaled slowly, like someone releasing a burden. He's not here, she said, and he won't come back. Why not? Because he's done what he needed to do. Keene stepped forward. Ma'am, your son is suspected in multiple thefts, over $1 million in losses. People are scared. We need to talk to him. The woman smiled faintly. Talk to him? You think he'd let you catch him? You think he leaves tracks because he wants to be found? She opened the door wider. Inside, the room was sparse wood stove, cot, bookshelf, crammed with engineering manuals and old medical journals. On the wall, a map of Pittsburgh was pinned with tiny red dots, each marking a location of a theft. But in the center, a photograph. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, smiling beside a hospital bed. A caption beneath, handwritten, Lyra's first seizure-free year. She's alive, the woman said softly. Thanks to him, the medicine, the specialists, the treatments they said we could never afford. He gave her time. 5 years. She passed last April, peacefully. Keene felt her throat tighten. And now? She asked. Now he's gone, the mother said. Where? I don't know. Maybe helping someone else? Maybe just resting. She handed Keene a small box wrapped in brown paper. This came yesterday. No return address. Just your name. Keene opened it. Inside, the Edison letter, the Titanic watch, and a note on thin stationery. Return these. They were borrowed. T.V. No arrest warrant was ever served. No trial convened. The FBI closed the case in March of 1988, citing insufficient evidence and lack of identifiable suspect. The media moved on. The public forgot. But in quiet corners among locksmiths, security consultants, and urban legends whispered in police academies, Thaddeus Vale became myth. They say he still moves. On nights when fog rolls in from the rivers, when the wind carries the scent of coal and frost, some claim to see a figure drifting past windows, never casting a shadow, never making a sound. They say he doesn't steal anymore. They say he helps. A wallet returned to a college student who lost it on the tee. A stack of bills slipped under the door of a family facing eviction. A prescription filled anonymously at a pharmacy in McKeesport. And sometimes, if you look closely at the snow-covered ground after such events, you'll notice something strange. No footprints. Just the faint impression of edges like someone walked on the very border of the world, never quite landing, never touching, never caught, and perhaps never meant to be. He robbed banks without saying a word. The note was for police only. In the quiet hours of a late autumn morning, when frost still clung to the sidewalks of suburban Cleveland and the sun had barely risen above the steel-gray rooftops, a man walked into the Huntington National Bank on East 93rd Street with nothing but a folded piece of paper in his hand. It was the year 2013, November the 12th, just past 9 o'clock, and the air inside the bank was warm too, warm-filled with the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the faint scent of coffee from the lobby dispenser. He wore a navy blue windbreaker, unzipped, over a plain gray hoodie, jeans that had seen too many washes, and scuffed work boots. Nothing about him stood out, not his height, not his build, not even the way he moved. Calm, deliberate, silent. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? He approached the second teller window where a woman named Marjorie, her name tag slightly crooked, was counting change into a tray. She looked up, smiled politely, and said, "Good morning. How can I help you?" He didn't return the smile, didn't speak. Instead, he slid the folded note across the counter. Marjorie picked it up, unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning the neatly printed words. "This is a robbery. Put $10,000 in this bag. No die packs, no marked bills. I am armed. Do not alert police. This note is for you only. After I leave, call them." Beneath it, a small brown paper sack lay flat, like something from a grocery run. Her fingers trembled, her breath caught. She glanced up. He hadn't moved. His hands were empty, palms down on the counter, but his eyes, they held hers. Not angry, not wild, just steady, cold, like ice over deep water. She nodded once, turned quietly, and began gathering bills from her drawer. 10 stacks of $100 bills. She placed them carefully into the bag, sealed it with a fold, and pushed it back toward him. He took it, slid it under his jacket. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out the front door, disappearing into the pale morning light. No alarm, no shouting, no panic at first. It wasn't until 2 minutes later, when Marjorie finally pressed the silent button beneath her desk, that the chaos began. Police arrived within 4 minutes, officers Reyes and Holloway from the 5th District rolling up in a marked cruiser, lights flashing, but sirens off. By then, the man was gone, vanished. Surveillance footage showed him exiting the bank, adjusting his hood, turning left onto Euclid Avenue, walking at a normal pace, no running, no urgency, before cutting through an alley behind a shuttered laundromat. The camera lost him there. But the note? The note remained, and it would become the thread that unraveled one of the most peculiar bank robbery sprees in modern American history. His name was Thaddeus Vale. Born in 1987 in Youngstown, Ohio, a rusted city where factories once roared but now stood silent, skeletons of steel and brick overtaken by weeds and time, Thaddeus was the son of a mechanic and a school cafeteria worker, raised in a modest bungalow on Glenwood Drive, where the paint peeled in summer and the furnace rattled all winter. He was bright top of his class at Rayen High, fluent in algebra and physics, could take apart a carburetor and rebuild it blindfolded, but life had a way of bending people in ways they couldn't predict. After high school, he enrolled at Kent State University on a partial scholarship, studying mechanical engineering. But halfway through his sophomore year, his mother fell ill, pancreatic cancer, aggressive and swift. The medical bills piled up, insurance didn't cover everything. Thaddeus dropped out to care for her, working double shifts at a warehouse in Akron, hauling boxes from midnight to dawn. She passed in the spring of 2010, and when she did, something in him cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. He drifted after that, lived in motels with weekly rates, took odd jobs, janitorial work, tree trimming, snow plowing, never stayed in one place longer than a few months. He avoided people, spoke little, read constantly philosophy, criminology, old detective novels, and somewhere in those pages, in the quiet solitude of motel rooms lit by flickering lamps, an idea formed. If banks were machines, then perhaps they could be manipulated like any other mechanism. Clean, precise, no violence, no hostages, just a message, a demand, a transaction. And so, in the fall of 2013, Thaddeus Vale began his campaign. The Huntington robbery was the first, but not the last. 3 days later, on November the 15th, another note appeared, this time at a PNC branch in Parma, Ohio. Same handwriting, same calm, chilling tone, $10,000. In cash. No tricks. I will not harm anyone, but I am armed. Leave the money in the bag, walk away, call police when I'm gone. Again, no words spoken. Again, the teller complied. Again, he vanished. Then, on November the 18th, a third bank, Fifth Third, this time in Medina, same method, same silence, same result. By now, local news had caught wind. Headlines screamed, "Silent Bandit strikes again." Police released grainy stills from security footage, back of headshots, blurred faces, a man in a hoodie moving like a shadow between buildings. Task forces were assembled. Detectives pored over maps, timelines, witness statements, but Thaddeus was careful, meticulous. He never used the same route twice, always entered during shift changes, when attention wavered, always chose branches with minimal security presence, and always left the note as his only voice. What made him different wasn't just the silence, it was the precision, the lack of greed. 10,000 each time, never more, never less, no demands for 20s or 50s, always hundreds. Easy to carry, easy to hide, and never once did he threaten a teller beyond the written warning. Never raised his voice, never reached for a weapon, yet every note carried the same phrase, "I am armed." Was he? Police couldn't say for sure. No gun was ever seen, no bulge in his jacket captured on camera, but the words alone were enough. Fear doesn't need a barrel to be real. As the spree continued, 4 banks in 5 weeks, the FBI got involved. Special Agent Lorna Keene, a veteran of the Cleveland field office, took point. Sharp-eyed, mid-40s, with a reputation for solving cold cases through patience and pattern recognition, she studied every detail. The notes, the timing, the geography. She noticed something others missed. All the banks were within a 30-mile radius of Cleveland. All were mid-sized branches, not the biggest, not the smallest. All had similar layouts, 2 teller windows near the entrance, security cameras angled slightly downward, no armed guards on duty, and all were robbed between 9:15 and 10 o'clock in the morning, just after opening, before the lunch rush. More telling? Each location was near a public transit line, bus routes, rail stations, places where a person could disappear into the flow of daily commuters. Agent Keene also studied the handwriting. Not rushed, not scribbled. Carefully printed block letters, evenly spaced, almost typewritten in their consistency, no smudges, no corrections. Whoever wrote these notes had practiced, repeatedly. And then there was the language. "I will not harm anyone." That phrase appeared in 3 of the 5 notes. Not typical for a robber. Most threats are vague, aggressive, designed to intimidate. But this sounded almost apologetic, defensive, as if he needed to justify his actions even to himself. Keene leaned back in her chair one evening, the glow of her computer screen casting long shadows across her office. Outside, rain tapped against the window. She stared at the timeline, pinned to the wall, 5 red dots marking the banks, connected by thin black lines showing possible escape routes. "He's not a criminal," she murmured. "He's a machine." Her partner, Agent Darnell, looked up from his coffee. "What?" "This isn't random, it's procedural, every move calculated, every word chosen. He's not trying to get rich, he's trying to prove something." "Prove what?" Keen didn't answer. Not yet. Meanwhile, Thaddeus had moved on. By December the 3rd, he struck again, this time in Elyria, a quiet city west of Cleveland. Another bank, another note, another 10,000. But this time, something changed. The teller, a young man named Calvin, hesitated. He read the note, looked up, saw Thaddeus standing there, motionless. Something in his eyes, maybe the exhaustion, maybe the sorrow, made Calvin pause. Instead of reaching for the money, he wrote a note of his own on a scrap of paper. Are you okay? He slid it across the counter. Thaddeus blinked. For the first time in weeks, his expression shifted. Just slightly. A flicker. Confusion. Surprise. He looked at the words, then back at Calvin. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket, not for a weapon, but for a pen. He wrote beneath Calvin's question. I have to do this. Please, just give me the money. Calvin nodded, fetched the cash, handed it over. And Thaddeus left. But that exchange haunted him. That night, in a dimly lit motel room on Oberlin Road, he sat on the edge of the bed, the stolen money stacked neatly on the dresser. He hadn't spent $1, not one. The bags remained sealed. He hadn't bought food, clothes, shelter, nothing. He opened a notebook, thick, leather-bound, filled with equations, diagrams, lists. On the latest page, he had written, Objective, $60,000. Purpose, clear debt, restore dignity, end cycle. 60,000. That was the number. The sum of his mother's unpaid medical bills. The balance that had ruined his credit, barred him from loans, kept him from rebuilding. 60,000, and he was halfway there. But now, Calvin's question echoed in his mind. Are you okay? No, he wasn't. He hadn't slept through the night in months. Dreams of his mother calling his name from a dark hallway, waking up, sweating, heart pounding. The weight of the lie, the fiction he'd created, pressed on his chest like a stone. He wasn't a monster, but he wasn't innocent either. On December the 9th, he entered a key bank in Lorraine. Same routine, same note, same silence. But as he waited for the teller to gather the money, he noticed something different. A photo on her desk. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, smiling in a yellow dress. Beside it, a small Christmas ornament, handmade, glued on glitter, crooked star on top. His throat tightened. For the first time, he looked around. Really looked. The bank wasn't just a machine, it was full of people. A man in a suit tapping his foot, waiting to deposit a paycheck. An elderly woman struggling with her purse. A janitor mopping the far corner, humming softly. These weren't cogs, they were lives. And he was disrupting them. When the teller handed him the bag, he didn't take it immediately. He stared at it. Then at her. Her name tag read Nadia. She gave a small, nervous nod. He whispered so low, only she could hear, I'm sorry. Then he turned and walked out. But not far. He didn't go to the alley. Didn't vanish. Instead, he sat on a bench outside a gas station half a block away, the bag at his feet, his head in his hands. 20 minutes later, Officer Reyes, same officer from the first robbery, pulled up, responding to a call about a suspicious person. He recognized the description. Hoodie, windbreaker, sitting still. He approached slowly, hand near his sidearm. Sir, you all right? Thaddeus didn't look up. I robbed 5 banks, he said, voice hollow. The money's in the bag. I didn't spend it. I want to turn myself in. Reyes froze. You what? I have the notes. Everything. I'll cooperate. Just don't shoot me. And just like that, it was over. Back at the station, Thaddeus was processed quietly. No cuffs at first, no shouting. When Agent Keene entered the interrogation room, she studied him for a long moment. You're not what I expected, she said. He looked up. I'm not who I thought I was either. She Saturday. Why? Why do this? He exhaled. To pay my mother's debts, to stop feeling like a failure. I thought if I could fix that one thing, maybe I could start over. And the silence? I didn't want to scare anyone. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Words, they can make things worse. But a note, you can read it, decide how to respond, gives people control. Keene leaned forward. You wrote, I am armed every time. Were you? He hesitated, then shook his head. No, I wasn't. But I knew they'd believe it. Fear works faster than truth. She nodded slowly. You're smarter than most people who do this. That's why you lasted so long. But not smart enough to know it wouldn't fix anything. No, she agreed. Money rarely does. The case made national headlines. The silent bandit surrenders. Note-writing robber claims he just wanted to be free. Some called him a criminal, others a tragic figure. A man broken by a system that offered no second chances. At trial, in March of 2014, Thaddeus pleaded guilty to 5 counts of bank robbery. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and tired eyes, listened to his statement. "I made a choice," he said, voice steady but quiet. "A wrong one. I thought I was correcting a mistake, but I only made another. I accept responsibility. And I apologize to the tellers, to the banks, to everyone I frightened. I'm not asking for mercy, just understanding." The courtroom was silent. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in federal prison, time credited for time served, minimum security, eligible for parole in 3. As he was led away, Agent Keene watched from the back row. Later, she visited him at the Federal Correctional Institution in Elkton. "How are you?" she asked. "Better," he said. "I read, I write, I help teach math to other inmates. I'm thinking." "About what?" "Starting over. Legally. Honestly, maybe becoming a counselor. For people who feel trapped." She smiled faintly. "You'd be good at that." He looked out the window. Snow was falling gently over the yard. "I finally understand," he said. "The note wasn't for the police. It was for me. A way to pretend I wasn't really doing this. To keep my conscience quiet. And now? Now I speak. Even when it hurts." Years passed. Thaddeus was released in the summer of 2017. Found work at a community center in Toledo, tutoring teens in math and science. Slowly rebuilt his life. Paid off the rest of his mother's debts, not with stolen money, but with honest wages. He never robbed another bank. He never needed to. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do isn't to take silence as armor, but to break it and speak.